Hello and welcome to Watch This Space. I'm Brian Carney with Rivada Networks, and today I am talking to Anne Vandenbroucke, who is the Chief Regulatory Officer of Rivada Space Networks. Anne, thank you so much for doing this. Welcome on the show.
Thank you. I'm delighted to speak about a subject that's very close to my heart.
Well, we're glad that you were able to come on and make time for us. And as I mentioned, is the Chief Regulatory Officer, and we wanted to talk to her especially today about space sustainability, which is not only a hot topic in the industry, but it's important to Rivada and to the way we are designing and building the outer net. So, and for our viewers and listeners who might not be familiar, can you just explain what space sustainability means and what it means to you and to Rivada in general?
Absolutely. Space sustainability has many, many connotations. For an operator, it obviously would mean that you operate your satellites responsibly, mitigate collisions, don't bump into other spacecraft or into all the other space debris that there is already out there, that you mitigate the fragmentation risk, creating space debris ourselves, and protect also the future of Earth's orbits, meaning not staying up there after the end of the mission, vacated, and then generally be a responsible operator. But it also has to other people and to other forums another further connotations, like it can also be interpreted as being related to orbital resources and associated with the spectrum, and that is a very new development. I was actually privileged to be in Bucharest in 2023 when the ITU for the first time actually took an interest and made a resolution about how today's use of the orbits and spectrum should not limit the ability for future generations to benefit from space services that use radio spectrum and orbital locations. It is also a concept that is actually quite close to secure communications and resilience. And when we see now the European space law that is being debated, they are concepts that are handled in the same vein. But of course, I like to see space sustainability from the other side, not only how operating in space creates risk, but mainly how operating in space is actually something that benefits the climate, that benefits the sustainability of Earth, that we as satellite operators provide vital services. And in fact, I was in Geneva at a forum where one of my learned colleagues from Saudi was speaking exactly on the topic and said that people ask me how space adds to or benefits the UN sustainability goals, and he said,
Okay.
in fact, I can't think of any of the 17 sustainability goals that doesn't benefit from them. So yes, and it's actually because it touches on so many aspects that it is a space lawyer's dream. There's so many forums involved in it, and it's evolving continuously now.
Okay, there's a lot to chew over there. So we have, I mean, I have to say, I was beginning where you were, right? The first thing that comes to my mind when I think about space sustainability is space junk, right? And on the one hand, and tell me if I'm wrong, my sense is that we've become a lot more conscious about space junk than we were in the past, right? We don't just leave stuff up there willy-nilly or leave late stages of rockets up there without any regard for what happens to them. On the other hand, we are launching a lot more stuff into space. So it's also a much bigger problem than it was when You might have only had a few dozen as satellites in orbit and a few, I don't know, maybe tens of launches a year. We're now way beyond that, and we have upwards of 10,000 satellites in operation, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot more stuff up there. But at the same time, it feels like the industry is much more attuned to some of these issues, right? You mentioned uh, protection of orbits, and I wonder if you could say a little bit about that, right? Because one of the dangers, as I understand it, is that if an orbit became sufficiently polluted with garbage because of collisions or whatever that produces a kind of cloud of debris, that you might not even be able to use that, at least for some period, maybe a long period of time until that clears. Is that what you mean when you talk about protecting certain orbital resources?
Yes, absolutely. I remember going to an international conference, and there was just a book out, Tim Marshall's book, and I remember it was like I couldn't go anywhere, my friends or anywhere, and people were talking about that, and knowing that I worked for an NGSO operator, I felt treated like working for somebody who was going to be a major polluter of a pristine space out there.
So,
And that's
so just
something.
sorry to interrupt, but what is the book called in case our viewers
It's
don't know?
called The Future of Geography.
Okay. Okay. And what's the thesis of the book?
So the subtitle says it is how power and politics in space will change our world.
Okay.
And there's a major chapter about debris. And I actually I spoke with the author. I had the privilege of meeting him, and that was, what are you doing about it? So one thing I wanted to put right is that NGSO and non-geostationary operators actually are very responsible, and they have to, because we're not polluting our own nest. No, none of our investors would be interested in investing in us if they didn't know that we weren't creating a self-destructing prophecy. So if there is quite a lot of debris out there, but it's historic debris. If you actually look at since 2018, how much debris has been added to the existing debris, it's very flat. So what is out there is not created by NGSO, and NGSO does a very, very, very good job at adhering to all and being compliant with all the measures that are out there to ensure that there is zero debris, but zero debris means that we don't add to what there is already there. So if you look at the line of the pieces of measured debris, then you see a couple of jumps, and that's created by a breakup of when a Russian and Iridium satellite unfortunately collided, and also in 2018 when there were some deliberate destruction of satellites for testing
Right. There was
for like.
an anti-satellite
Correct,
missile test,
correct,
right? That
correct,
contributed a
correct.
huge proportion of the debris. I just want to, in case people don't know, when you say NGSO, that's kind of regulatory speak for what others might call low Earth orbit, right?
Correct.
You mentioned that it stands for non-geostationary
Yes,
orbit, right? So these
yes,
are a lot of the satellite, like the constellation that Rivada's building, but also, other competitors that get a lot of press. These are all NGSO or low Earth orbit or LEO constellations that are distinguished from geo satellites, which kind of
yes.
stay in one place, but they're much farther away from the Earth. And the LEO ones are moving. They're close enough that they're moving with respect to the surface, and that creates challenges in part for this space debris problem because they're flying around each other, and if their orbits are close to each other or they don't respect the orbits that they're supposed to be in, there's risk that they could collide, right?
They fly around, and they are constellations. There's so many more of them, but from a space debris point of view, they are actually, well, space, of course, is large. So sometimes I see these ESA globe go around, and you kind of see this poor Earth beings has a whole nest of microbes crawling out over it, and it's completely saturated around it with satellites. And I recently saw something very insightful from which Dr. Koller presented, and he won't mind that I repeat that. He actually calculated, if you in that ESA model that's often shown, you would take the actual size of one of these dots,
right?
That and so which represents a satellite. It would actually be the size of the Red Sea.
Wow.
So the dot should be much smaller. So if we, the Earth, and the end of my finger is where low Earth orbit, then there a satellite would be the size of a microbe. So it's not like the Earth is in space is invaded with satellite. It's big, but there may be some misrepresentation.
Right, because you're talking about
model.
satellites that might be the size of a refrigerator or the size of a small
correct.
car, but in those plots, the dots are like the size of a city, or as you said, the size of the Red Sea or something. So if you made them to scale, obviously the dots
correct.
would be invisible. It's like trying to see a refrigerator from 1,000 kilometers away,
Yes.
right? It's too small, which again doesn't mean debris is not a problem, but it means that those images, like you see those images and you think, how can I see the night sky at all, right? It seems like it should just be filled with satellites, but the scale is not representative.
Yeah. And another aspect which I'm quite keen always in debates and in panels to address is that the increase of low Earth satellites, and of which the Rivada constellation will be part, the increase in that number does not correlate with increases in debris fragmentation, because the atmospheric drag efficiently removes debris in low Earth. And
Okay.
I always find it fascinating to point out how long it actually takes satellites in much higher orbits to actually be, when they stopped working, to no longer be up there and be debris, be something that has no use, no function anymore. But did you know that if the dinosaurs had launched satellites, that in the higher orbits, the geostationary orbit, that they would still be up there, and they would still be up there for millions of years?
So I guess we know they didn't because we don't see their satellites, right? So it's.
But if we dinosaurs about space debris and ignore the historic debris, then historic debris will be up there for millions of years, while that of low Earth satellites demises and comes back is removed within a maximum of 25 and very often much shorter times. So it's important to put right that the atmospheric drag is a natural way to remove debris which isn't there for historic debris. So our satellites will operate at 1,200 kilometer, and that the natural decline of them, if we wouldn't actively deorbit them, can you guess how long it would take for them to actually get to a point where they're in the atmosphere and burn up?
I don't know, 10 years. I have no idea.
About 2,000.
Okay, 2,000 years
Yes.
at
Yes.
1,000 kilometers.
Correct, 1,200.
Okay.
So it really shows that if an operator like Rivada does not voluntary, we support that there's legislation to remove obsolete satellites quickly from their orbit. It comes at a cost.
Right.
Because
Okay.
we need to use and foresee quite a lot of fuel and maneuverability. So we need to switch off our instruments, stop the operation of the satellite, pacify it, make sure that there's no the fuel is disposed of, and have sufficient fuel on board to perform a maneuver to bring it and reduce the orbit time, natural orbit time, from 2,000 years to something which is according to the legislation 25 or 5 years or whatever international legislation is, and we support that. And it comes at so sometimes you hear that operators use materials or take points of view which are show only in their economic benefit. But I must really say that I'm pleased to work for an operator where from the design point until including its policy points, we believe in sustainability, not because we have to, but because it actually is a good thing for the sustainability of the arc we were working.
Sure. So say something about that. So Rivada, part of Rivada's plans, as I think you just said, is we have built in enough fuel into the design and into sort of the cadence of the useful life of the satellites to ensure that we don't just leave them where they were when, when their useful life is over, but that we have enough remaining resources and we have it built into our plans to deorbit them actively. Is that what you're saying?
So it starts with our choice of material. So all the satellites were built to never demise and stay forever in the harsh environment in outer space. Now the materials and the construction of a satellite is very, very sophisticated. It needs to have the balance between being strong enough to withstand for its operational the life when it provides service, to be able to withstand the perils of outer space, solar flares, remnants of asteroids, lots of hostile environment, but then at the same time be demisable enough so that the atmospheric drag can burn it up, which that's quite a feat to achieve. So and then of course in the design team already asks, how quickly do we need to bring a satellite down to 400 meter where it actually starts its descent. And of course, if international regulation would change from 25 years to 10 years or to 5 years, that makes a real important it has an important impact on the design. You also satellite operators and regulatory people talk an extreme amount about colors, shades of gray. In the sense of that dark and quiet skies is legitimately a very important thing to take into account. It's what you said before. As human beings, we like to see the sky. We don't want stars to be obscured by a load of satellites, however useful they are for our daily life. So yes, you don't want these satellites to be visible by the naked eye, but of course it needs an amount of reflection because it works with solar panels, and of course a dark satellite will not be able to operate, to have sufficient energy if it didn't get that balance right. So
Right.
there is a lot in the materials you choose, the design, the fuel levels, and of course in the business case.
Right.
You may shave off an amount of time of a satellite that was perfectly still capable of continuing to work, but needs to start making its descent.
Sure. But on the other hand, as you said, yeah, if you're in it for the long term, you also don't want to soil your own nest, right? If we have a constellation at a certain altitude and we were just to leave kind of dead satellites up there, we would be endangering our own next generation of satellites, right? So it makes sense just on that business level to say, well, we need to get the old stuff out of the way so we can put new ones into those orbits without bumping into our own debris, right? So
Yes.
there's a
Yes.
self-interested logic at work as well. It's not
It's
purely
totally, absolutely, absolutely correct. We are there for the long time. We're not a blip. We're there for a good period of time. But the effort, we shouldn't be naive in that neither. It's not like if we sweep in front of our own satellites and we don't create debris and we are totally responsible and we're the good, and everybody else is a bit of considering the Wild West. Of course, that you don't want to be naive in a Wild West. So we are, for us, all these international initiatives, be it in UNCLOS, being in the ITU, being in World Economic Forum, being in ESA, being it with national regulators like the FCC, and think tanks. Like there was a fantastic paper from a Saudi institute where some really major brains, including Joanne Whelan from the UK, which I also admire, together with the Secretaries General of the ITU, Doreen Bogdan, and the Secretary General of ONUSA, Arti Hola.
What is UNUSA? Sorry, what is UNUSA?
UNUSA is a UN office for peaceful use of outer space, and they are the institute that actually has the mandate for it in the strict sense of the word of knowing what is out there, registering space objects. So they all work a bit within the limitations of the remit of their institutions and the functioning of their institutions themselves. It can be glacially slow at times. So if there's an out of the box thinking like that paper from the Saudi Institute actually said there's a lot of similarities between outer space law with what happened previously in avionics. And they made a bit of a history of how, from an institution, from a law, and from a treaty, and from a practice point of view, and from the involvement of the industry, they came to an international system of what we all have to admit is safe operations of avionics. Of aviation, not avionics, aviation.
Right.
And it just was so much food for thought that, look, if even in the current geopolitical situation, this must be possible to, at an international scale, see the urgency of it, see the mutual benefit of it, and then even come to some simple standardization. If you have to do collision avoidance and two satellite operators pick up the phone and speak to each other about who's going to avoid who and who's going where, that we all agree that all speak into kilometer per second or miles per hour, or that at least there's some standardization in the way the information on velocity, on direction of travel, and what the object is, and its capabilities of avoidance, that people can understand each other.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. Um, and being able to speak to each other, sharing a common language. I mean, I think, we've heard some crazy stories in the early days of space about people getting miles versus kilometers wrong, or things like that. There's what you just said about what can move and what can't move and what the object is reminded me of the silly old story about an aircraft carrier telling a lighthouse to get out of its way,
Yeah,
and that kind of thing.
yeah.
Different objects up there, different satellites, different types of things may have different maneuverability, right? Obviously, we can't move something like the International Space Station as quickly or easily as we can, a single satellite, or the Chinese space station, or some future thing that's up there. And we have to be aware of who can move and who can't, and all of that. So that makes a lot
We
of
do
sense.
we do want to tell the astronauts to take much better care of their toolkits, because at some point one was on a spacewalk and their toolkit got loose, and it created so what hit you? A spanner from the International Space Station. But yes, that's
Yeah.
the right thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, then, believe it or not, we've been talking now for almost 30 minutes, and we try to be respectful of our viewers' time. This is a huge subject, and I feel like we've barely scratched the surface. So I'd love to have you on again, and continue to talk about the importance of this, more about what Rivada specifically is doing, and also more about the international context here, because as you said, there's initiatives at a variety of levels and coming from a variety of institutions, all devoted to trying to make sure that we can continue to safely use space for communications and all the other things that we are using it for, and will be using it for in the future. But
Yeah.
appreciate you coming on.
They have given very proud moments to myself and to Rivada. I will never ever forget having been allowed to be the signature on behalf of Rivada of the ESA Zero Debris Charter, and also of in the presence of His Majesty King Charles, the Astra Carta
Right.
seal. So yes, it is something that is hugely important to Rivada and to myself.
Yes, and we're grateful that you have been one of the people in Rivada that has kept us focused on this issue. Not that others don't care about it, but it is something that you have been a guiding light for us for, from the beginning. So again, thanks for coming on, and thanks for your insights. I really do feel like we only just started, so I hope we can do a follow-up. And again, this has been Watch This Space, and thank you to all our viewers for tuning in.